By the end of this story, one of these two women will be Luna, and it won't be the one you're rooting for right now. Follow before we go back to the night everything started, because her calm is not what it looks like. Your Grace, she is here. Mahout's voice trembled. Aveline did not look up from the embroidery stretched across her inward. Rohesia entered, wearing triumph like perfume. Her gown was pale gold, and her smile carefully effortless. But it was her left wrist she presented first, lifting one hand to adjust a curl that did not need adjusting. Around it rested Conaire's ceremonial claiming bracelet, black silver. A single blood-red moonstone, the crest of House Blackthorn carved into the clasp. Every servant in the room recognized it. So did Aveline. Rohesia crossed the carpet slowly, allowing the bracelet to catch the afternoon light. "I came to tell you myself," she said. "Conaire has chosen me." Aveline set the embroidery aside. Rohesia's smile widened. "He intends to reject your bond before the Wolf Council. After that, I will be named Luna of Blackthorn." Silence filled the drawing room. The young maid beside the window lowered her tray before her shaking hands could betray her. Mahout moved closer to Aveline without appearing to move at all. Everyone waited for the same thing. A scream, a slap, a plea. Perhaps Aveline would tear the bracelet from Rohesia's wrist. Perhaps she would fall to her knees and beg the childhood friend she once loved like a sister not to take her husband, her title, and the life an entire kingdom had envied. Aveline stood. Rohesia braced herself. Instead, Aveline walked forward, took both of Rohesia's hands, and smiled. "Congratulations!" Rohesia blinked. The servants looked up. "You are congratulating me?" "Should I not? You are losing everything." Aveline's smile did not change. She leaned closer until Rohesia alone could hear her. "You believe you are taking my place. You are only inheriting the nightmare I survived." For one moment, uncertainty touched Rohesia's face. Then she laughed. Softly, then with the indulgence of a winner, allowing the defeated woman one final attempt at pride. "If that helps you endure the humiliation, I will not argue." She turned her wrist again, admiring the moonstone. Rohesia believed Aveline's calmness was heartbreak wearing a graceful mask. She would remember those words later, when the doors of Conaire's chamber locked behind her and no servant dared answer her screams. Now let's go back to the night the entire kingdom believed she was the luckiest woman alive. 1 year earlier, no woman in the kingdom would have believed such a future possible. Every autumn, the royal palace hosted the Moon Harvest Ball, and that year the celebration appeared brighter than the full moon suspended above its glass domes. Chandeliers burned with hundreds of silver flames. Musicians played from a gallery draped in black and blue silk. Alphas, Lunas, and heirs from 7 territories filled the marble ballroom. Then the master of ceremonies struck his staff. Alpha Conaire Blackthorn and Luna-Aveline Blackthorn. Conversation faded. Conaire entered first, tall and commanding in a black military coat embroidered with silver wolves. Aveline walked beside him in midnight blue silk, a moonstone necklace resting against her throat. The stones matched her eyes and glittered whenever she moved. Together, they looked untouchable. 3 young she-wolves approached Conaire before the first dance ended. "Your Grace," one said, smiling boldly, "will you honor me with the next waltz?" Another stepped closer. "Surely your Luna cannot claim every dance." Conaire looked toward Aveline with such open devotion that nearby women sighed. "She can," he said. Every dance belongs to my Luna. Admiration moved through the ballroom. Aveline accepted his hand. Conaire drew her onto the floor, his palm warm against her back, his smile gentle enough to fool a kingdom. They moved beneath the chandeliers, while nobles watched as though love itself had taken human form. Near the refreshment table, Rohesia applauded with everyone else. But her eyes remained fixed on Aveline's necklace, on the bows offered whenever she passed, on the powerful Alpha who refused every woman for her. When Aveline joined her between dances, Rohesia forced a smile. You truly have everything. Aveline's gaze moved briefly toward Conaire. Not everything. Rohesia laughed, believing she was being modest. Hours later, Conaire wrapped a fur cloak around Aveline's shoulders and personally helped her into their carriage. Stable boys watched with admiration as he protected her gown from the wet ground. The tenderness lasted until Blackthorn Keep's doors closed behind them. Conaire seized the moonstone necklace and tore it from her throat. The clasp snapped. Silver stones scattered across the floor. You smiled at Alpha Roderick. He greeted me. You enjoyed it. I was being courteous. His hand struck her before she finished. Aveline fell against the marble table, one palm catching the edge. Behind the half-closed door, Mahaut lowered her eyes. Conaire stood over his wife, all warmth gone from his face. Cover the bruise, he said. The pack will see a happy Luna in the morning. By sunrise, powder covered the darkening mark across Aveline's cheek. Mahaut fastened a high silver collar around her throat to conceal the scratches left by the broken necklace. Neither woman mentioned the blood they had scrubbed from the marble floor before dawn. When Aveline entered the great hall beside Conaire, the assembled pack rose. Their Alpha placed one gentle hand at the small of her back. My Luna was exhausted after the ball, he announced warmly. I insisted she rest, but she refused to disappoint the pack. Admiring smiles surrounded them. An elderly councilwoman pressed a hand to her heart. You take such wonderful care of her, Alpha. Conaire looked down at Aveline with practiced devotion. She is my greatest treasure. His fingers tightened against her spine. Aveline smiled. That became the rhythm of her life inside Blackthorn Keep. In private, Conaire found fault with everything. Her gowns were too bright. Then too plain. She spoke too freely before visiting Alphas, then embarrassed him by remaining silent. If she walked ahead of him, she was disrespectful. If she fell behind, she made him appear weak. If another man greeted her, she had encouraged him. If she avoided every man in the room, she was behaving suspiciously. You looked at Lord Cyneric twice, Conaire accused one evening. He was presenting the winter grain report. You enjoyed his attention. I was listening. His hand closed around her wrist. Do not argue with me. The next morning, he kissed that same wrist before the entire council and apologized for keeping his beloved Luna away from the banquet preparations. The servants learned when to disappear. They learned which doors to close and which corridors to avoid. They learned not to react when glass shattered, when furniture struck walls, or when Aveline entered breakfast, wearing sleeves too long for the season. No one spoke, because Conaire owned the keep, commanded the warriors, and controlled every household beneath Blackthorn protection. Beyond its walls, he remained the most admired Alpha in the Northern Territories. He funded orphanages. He settled disputes between weaker packs. He sent grain to villages after failed harvests. Whenever he placed his cloak around Aveline's shoulders before witnesses, young she-wolves whispered that the moon goddess had blessed her above all others. Her own family believed the same. Every month, wagons bearing Blackthorn's crest arrived at Wigmund and Demelza's cottage, carrying flour, salted meat, and winter coal. Conaire had given them cattle, repaired their roof, and stationed guards near their land after rogues were sighted in the valley. Their son, Anselm, trained at the Royal Fang Academy, where only the heirs of powerful houses could afford to study. Their youngest daughter, Melisende, attended the prestigious Silver Moon Institute, learning diplomacy, music, and the duties expected of a future Luna. Whenever Demelza wrote to Aveline, the letters overflowed with gratitude. "Your marriage has saved us all." For a long time, Aveline repeated those words whenever survival felt impossible. Then one winter morning, she awakened before dawn and barely reached the basin before becoming ill. The healer arrived secretly through Mahout's entrance. After examining her, the woman smiled. "You are carrying a child, my Luna." Aveline stared at her. "A child?" "Nearly 7 weeks." Her hands moved slowly toward her stomach. For the first time in months, hope entered Blackthorn Keep. She imagined Conaire holding a tiny son. She imagined his pride softening his anger. Perhaps the man who showed kindness to every child in the villages would finally bring that kindness home. She decided not to tell him immediately. She wanted to give him something beautiful. During quiet afternoons, Aveline sat near the drawing room window, sewing tiny garments. She embroidered silver wolves along the edge of a soft blue blanket and made slippers small enough to fit inside her palm. Mahout discovered her one afternoon. The old housekeeper stopped beside the table, tears immediately filling her eyes. "My Luna." Aveline lifted the unfinished blanket. "I was going to tell him when I completed this." Mahout touched the delicate embroidery. "Perhaps this child will remind him of the man he shows the world." Aveline smiled faintly. Perhaps that man is still somewhere inside him. They guarded the secret for 3 more days. On the 4th evening, Conaire returned from a council meeting, furious over a disputed border. Dinner had been prepared exactly as ordered, but one kitchen maid had collapsed with fever. The delay lasted only minutes. When Conaire lifted the silver spoon to his lips, the venison broth was warm rather than steaming. His expression darkened. "This is cold." Aveline glanced toward the trembling servants. "I'll have it replaced." He shoved the bowl away. "Was I unclear when I said dinner would be served the moment I returned?" The kitchen maid became ill. It was not deliberate. Conaire slowly rose. "Are you defending their incompetence?" "No, I'm only explaining." "I did not ask for an explanation." The young maid responsible began crying. "Forgive me, Alpha." Conaire reached for the heavy silver serving dish. Aveline stood quickly. "She is ill, Conaire. Punish me if someone must answer for it." He turned toward her. "You always humiliate me by taking their side." "I am not trying to humiliate you." The dish left his hand. It struck Aveline across the lower body with such force that she fell beside the table. For 1 second, no one moved. Then Mahout screamed. Blood spread beneath Aveline's gown. The pack healer worked throughout the night. Towels were carried from the chamber stained red. Aveline drifted between pain and desperate prayer. One hand clutched over the life she could feel slipping away. Just before sunrise, the healer lowered her head. "I am sorry." Mahout placed the unfinished blue blanket in Aveline's arms. She held it against her chest and stared at the tiny silver wolves she had sewn for a child who would never see them. Hours later, the door opened. Conaire entered. For one foolish moment, Aveline believed he had come to mourn with her. He stood at the foot of the bed without touching her. Perhaps the moon goddess knew you were unworthy of carrying my heir." Then he turned and left. Aveline did not cry. Something inside her had begun to die beside the child she had lost. But one hope remained. She still believed her family would protect her. 3 days later, while Blackthorn Keep still believed she was too weak to leave her bed, Aveline wrapped herself in a plain cloak and slipped through the servants' gate. Mahout had begged her to wait. "You can barely stand." "I cannot remain here. My Luna, if the Alpha discovers, he has already taken my child. What else is left for him to threaten?" Mahout had no answer. Aveline travelled without a carriage, avoiding the main road until the towers of Blackthorn Keep disappeared behind the forest. Every step pulled at the pain in her body, but the thought of her mother's arms carried her forward. By afternoon, she reached the cottage where she had grown up. Demelza opened the door. For one startled moment, she simply stared. Then she pulled Aveline inside and wrapped both arms around her. "My daughter, what happened to you?" The familiar warmth nearly broke her. Wigmund rose from beside the fire. Melisende abandoned the book in her lap. Anselm, home from the Royal Fang Academy for several days, stepped out of the adjoining room. They gathered around her. Aveline looked at their frightened faces and believed she had finally reached safety. She removed her cloak. Then she rolled back her sleeves. Dark marks covered her wrists. Yellowing bruises stained her arms. A cut crossed one shoulder where Conaire's ring had torn her skin. When she loosened the collar of her dress, Demelza covered her mouth. "Who did this?" Aveline looked at her mother. "Conaire." Silence swallowed the room. "He has been hurting me since the first month of our marriage." Demelza began to cry. Aveline pressed one trembling hand over her stomach. "I was carrying his child." Wigmund's expression changed. "Was?" "He killed the baby." Melisende gasped. Anselm stared at the floor. Aveline waited for her father to cross the room and swear that she would never return to Blackthorn Keep. Instead, Wigmund asked, "Did anyone see you leave?" She blinked. "What? Did any guard see you? Did anyone follow you here?" "I came because I need help." Wigmund walked toward the window and looked down the road. "If Conaire discovers you ran here, he will think we encouraged it. He struck me while I was pregnant." "I heard you." "Then help me escape." Demelza reached for her hands, but her grip felt desperate rather than protective. "Aveline, where would you go?" "Anywhere." Wigmund turned from the window. "And what happens to us?" She stared at him. "The guards protecting this valley belong to Blackthorn. If you leave him, they will be withdrawn. The rogues will return before winter." "Our cattle came from Conaire," Demelza whispered. "So did the grain stored in the barn," Wigmund continued, each word landing harder than the last. "Anselm's place at the Royal Fang Academy exists because your husband pays the fees. Melisende's training at the Silver Moon Institute will end the moment Blackthorn withdraws its name. This cottage, the fields, the livestock, everything we have depends upon your marriage. I may not survive another year in that marriage." Demelza began sobbing. "My child, please, endure a little longer, perhaps after his anger passes." "It has never passed." "He may change." "He killed my baby." Anselm suddenly crossed the room and knelt before her. "Aveline, I graduate in less than a year." She looked down at him. "Please," he said. "If I lose my position now, every year of training will mean nothing. I will never become a royal warrior. Just wait until I finish." "You are asking me to return to him." "I am asking you not to destroy my future. The words struck deeper than Conaire's hand ever had. Aveline looked toward Melisende. Her younger sister's eyes filled with tears, but she turned her face away. No one asked whether Aveline would live long enough to see Anselm graduate. By sunset, she was walking back toward Blackthorn Keep. Conaire was waiting in the drawing room when she arrived. He sat beside the fire, with one ankle resting over his knee, as calm as though he had known every step she would take. Aveline stopped inside the doorway. He studied her swollen eyes. "Your family sent you back." She said nothing. A faint smile appeared on his face. "I wondered how long it would take them to remind you who feeds them." Aveline lowered her gaze. Conaire rose and walked around her slowly. "You see, no one wants you without what I provide." His fingers lifted her chin. "You belong here." The months that followed taught Aveline a different kind of survival. She stopped pleading when his temper rose. Pleading lengthened his anger. Tears entertained it. Silence usually exhausted it faster. So she learned to stand still. She learned to lower her eyes. She learned to wait for the door to close. Before the pack, she remained graceful. She welcomed guests beside Conaire, accepted his public kisses, and smiled while women praised the strength of their bond. Inside, she stopped believing the man they admired would ever become real. Then, one spring morning, the pack healer took Aveline's hand and placed it gently over her stomach. "My Luna," she whispered, "you are with child again." Joy rose first. Fear crushed it immediately. Aveline seized the healer's wrist. "You cannot tell him. My lady, he is the father. If he knows, this child may die too." The healer saw the terror in her eyes and slowly nodded. Mahout was the only other person Aveline trusted. That night, the old housekeeper knelt beside her bed and held both her hands. "Perhaps this time, the moon goddess will show mercy." Aveline looked down at her stomach. "I no longer pray for a happy marriage." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I only want this child to live." Mahout tightened her hold around Aveline's hands. "Then we will protect this child," she whispered. "No one else needs to know." From that day forward, every part of Aveline's routine changed. The pack healer visited only through the narrow servants' passage before sunrise. She carried no medical bag and wore the plain cloak of a kitchen supplier. Mahout altered Aveline's gowns herself, adding layers of fabric around the waist so that no seamstress would notice the gradual change in her body. Meals were adjusted without explanation. Herbal tonics were poured into ordinary teapots. Whenever sickness forced Aveline to remain in her room, Mahout told Conaire that his wife had been awake all night reviewing household accounts. For several weeks, the secret remained safe. Then Rohacia began visiting Blackthorn Keep. The first time, she arrived carrying a basket of honey pastries from the capital. "I remembered how much you loved these when we were girls," she said. Aveline embraced her. No one from her family had visited since sending her back. Their letters spoke only of Anselm's training, Melisende's lessons, and the supplies delivered by Conaire's wagons. Rohacia was the only person who asked whether Aveline felt lonely. After that, she came almost every week. Sometimes she brought fresh flowers. Sometimes rare books, silk ribbons, or fragrant teas purchased from southern merchants. "I cannot bear imagining you alone in this enormous place," Rohacia said one afternoon as they sat beside the drawing room fire. "You were always happiest when there was someone to talk to." Aveline smiled. "You remember me better than anyone." For a while, it felt true. They spoke about the village where they had grown up. They remembered stealing fruit from Wigman's orchard. and hiding beneath Demelza's washing lines whenever they were caught. They embroidered together, shared gossip from the capital, and laughed quietly over things that had once seemed important. Aveline never told Rohesia about the pregnancy. She did not tell her about the bruises either, but friendship made the walls of Blackthorn Keep feel less suffocating. Whenever Conaire entered the room, Rohesia's manner changed so subtly that Aveline did not recognize it at first. Her posture straightened. Her voice became brighter. Her laughter came more easily. When Conaire discussed pack business, Rohesia listened as though every word carried the wisdom of a king. "The western border has remained peaceful because of your leadership," she told him. Conaire smiled. "You understand more about politics than most councilmen." Rohesia lowered her eyes modestly. "I only understand strength when I see it." Aveline noticed that Conaire seemed calmer after Rohesia's visits. He laughed more often in her presence. He remained at the dinner table longer. On evenings when Rohesia praised his judgment, he sometimes went to bed without finding a reason to criticize Aveline. Aveline mistook his improved mood for peace. She began looking forward to Rohesia's arrival, not only because she needed companionship, but because her friend appeared capable of drawing kindness from a man who had almost forgotten it. The illusion ended one rainy afternoon. Aveline had been sorting winter garments in her dressing room. Mahout entered to tell her the healer had arrived, and in their hurry, neither woman remembered to close the cedar chest beside the window. Conaire came home earlier than expected. He entered the dressing room without knocking. Aveline froze. His gaze settled on the open chest. Inside lay a knitted blanket, 2 tiny shirts, and a pair of white slippers no larger than his palm. He slowly lifted one garment. "What is this?" Mahout's face lost all color. Aveline stepped between them. "I intended to tell you." Conaire looked at her stomach, then back at the garments. "You are carrying my child." She said nothing. "How long?" "Nearly 4 months." His expression darkened. "You concealed my heir for 4 months?" "I wanted to be certain the baby was safe." "Safe from whom?" Aveline's silence answered. Conaire threw the tiny shirt across the room. "You think I killed the first child?" "I did not say that." "You did not need to." He advanced toward her. Mahout moved forward. "Alpha, the healer warned that Luna Aveline must avoid distress. Leave us." "My lord." "Now." Aveline gave Mahout a small nod. The old woman reluctantly withdrew. Conaire seized Aveline's arm. "You told the servants before you told me." "Only Mahout and the healer know. So they have been laughing at me behind my back." "No one has laughed at you. You made me a fool inside my own house." "I was afraid." The words escaped before Aveline could stop them. Conaire became still. "Afraid of me?" She pulled against his grip. "Please, the baby." His face twisted, as though her fear were an insult. "You accuse me of harming my own heir, then expect me to remain calm." "I am not accusing you. I am asking you to let go." He shoved her away. Aveline stumbled through the open doorway. Behind her stood the grand moon stair, its polished marble steps descending toward the entrance hall. Her heel caught the edge. For one suspended heartbeat, she saw Conaire's hand still raised between them. Then the floor disappeared. Aveline struck the first step with her shoulder. The next caught her back. She reached for the silver railing but missed. Her body rolled helplessly downward until she crashed against the marble floor below. Mahout screamed. Servants rushed from every corridor. The healer worked for hours inside Aveline's chamber. Outside the door, Conaire paced, while Mahout sat with blood covering both hands. Near sunset, the healer emerged. Her face revealed the truth before she spoke. The child is gone. Mahout closed her eyes. The healer continued, forcing herself to look at Conaire. Her body has suffered too much trauma. The first loss weakened her severely, and this fall has caused further damage. She may never be able to carry another child. Conaire did not ask whether Aveline would recover. He did not ask whether she was awake. He only said, "Then she has no purpose as my Luna." The bedroom door had been left slightly open. Aveline heard every word. She lay motionless beneath the blankets, one hand resting over the emptiness where her child had lived. This time, no hope survived with it. That evening, carriage wheels sounded in the courtyard. Aveline forced herself upright and looked through the window. Rohesia stepped down, carrying a bouquet of white moon lilies. Conaire personally walked outside to greet her. He took the flowers, said something Aveline could not hear, and smiled. It was not his public smile. It was gentle, effortless, warm. Aveline pressed her palm against the cold glass. "So that is where your kindness went." Hours later, unable to sleep, she heard laughter beneath her window. She wrapped a robe around her weakened body and followed the sound into the moon garden. Beneath the ancient ash tree, Conaire stood holding both of Rohesia's hands. "If you were free," Rohesia whispered, "would you choose me?" Conaire did not hesitate. "Aveline will not remain Luna much longer." Rohesia smiled. Aveline waited for jealousy. She waited for grief. Instead, relief flooded through her so powerfully that she nearly laughed. For the first time, she understood that Rohesia's envy might become the doorway out of her prison. For the first time, Aveline understood that Rohesia's envy might become the doorway out of her prison. She returned to her chamber without confronting either of them. No accusations, no tears. No demand that Rohesia explain why the woman who once shared her childhood secrets was now holding her husband's hands beneath the moonlight. Aveline had spent years fighting to preserve a marriage that was slowly destroying her. She would not waste the first chance of escape by frightening that chance away. The following morning, she knelt beside her bed and lifted the corner of the carpet. One of the wooden boards beneath it had loosened with age. Mahout watched as Aveline carefully pried it open. Inside was a hollow space between the floor beams. "What are you doing, my Luna?" "Making sure I never have to ask my family for shelter again." Aveline placed 3 silver sovereigns beneath the board. They were all she possessed without Conaire's knowledge. From then on, she saved whatever she could. She sold a pearl brooch Conaire had not seen in years. A month later, she quietly sold a pair of earrings. Never enough at once to attract suspicion. Never anything important enough for him to remember. The coins disappeared beneath the floorboard. But money alone would not protect her. "I need to learn how to survive," Aveline told Mahout. The old woman studied her face. Then she brought out moon silk. It was finer than ordinary fabric and difficult to work with. One careless pull could ruin an entire length. Royal seamstresses train for years before they are trusted with this, Mahout said. "Then teach me as though I have years." Every afternoon, Aveline practiced. Her first stitches were uneven. Threads knotted beneath her fingers. Tiny needles pierced her skin until drops of blood stained the cloth. Mahout never allowed her to stop. Again, Aveline removed the ruined thread. Again. By winter, she could embroider silver wolves, moonflowers, and royal crests with the precision of a court seamstress. She also began visiting the pack steward. Conaire believed she was finally taking her household duties seriously. Aveline encouraged the belief. "I want to understand why our winter expenses increased," she told the steward. He opened the account ledgers. At first, the numbers meant little to her, but she learned quickly. She learned how merchants concealed poor-quality fabric beneath impressive descriptions. She learned which trade roads became impassable after heavy snow. She learned how much silk cost in the southern territories, and how much noble women in the capital would pay once it was embroidered. She studied bookkeeping, supplier agreements, and merchant customs. When fabric sellers arrived, she listened to every negotiation. When grain traders argued over transport fees, she remembered their methods. Slowly, a future began forming inside her mind. It contained no title, no Blackthorn protection, no family waiting to receive her. Only the coins beneath the floor, the skill in her hands, and the knowledge she had gathered without Conaire noticing. Then Aveline invited Rohesia to tea. They sat inside the glass conservatory overlooking the frost-covered gardens. Rohesia wore a new green gown and a bracelet Aveline recognized as one of Conaire's private gifts. Neither woman mentioned it. Aveline lowered her eyes toward her teacup. "I have failed him." Rohesia immediately reached across the table. "You must not speak that way. I cannot give him an heir. I cannot make him happy. Even the household seems to disappoint him now." Rohesia's expression softened with carefully performed concern. "Conaire carries great responsibilities. Perhaps the pressure makes him difficult. He deserves someone who understands that pressure." Rohesia became very still. Aveline continued quietly. "Someone confident enough to stand beside him. Someone who admires his ambitions instead of fearing them. You are his Luna. For now." A spark appeared in Rohesia's eyes before she lowered them. "You should not give up on your marriage." The words sounded loyal. Her smile did not. Aveline reached for her hand. "You have always been stronger than I am." Rohesia squeezed her fingers. "You are only tired." Aveline said nothing more. She did not invite Rohesia to take Conaire. She simply removed the final reason Rohesia might have had to feel guilty. That night, Aveline opened the diary she had kept since her wedding. Earlier pages were filled with prayers, asking the moon goddess to soften Conaire's heart. She turned to a clean page. "Today I stopped praying for my marriage to survive and started preparing for my freedom." After that, her transformation became invisible. If Conaire requested venison for supper, it arrived slightly overcooked. If he ordered the receiving hall prepared by noon, one arrangement remained unfinished until 12 minutes past the hour. His favorite coat was pressed perfectly, but paired with the wrong ceremonial clasp. Nothing was ruined. Nothing could be called deliberate. Yet every small imperfection irritated him. "You cannot manage one simple household," he snapped, after finding white roses where he had requested red. Aveline lowered her head. "I am sorry, Conaire. I will do better tomorrow." He waited for tears. None came. "Is that all you have to say?" "Yes." Her calmness angered him more than pleading ever had. Outside Blackthorn Keep, however, Aveline became the perfect Luna. At council dinners, she praised his judgment. When neighboring Alphas admired the pack's growing wealth, she smiled proudly. Conaire works harder for this kingdom than anyone realizes. At the winter assembly, a noble woman complimented Aveline's cloak. "My husband chose it," she replied. "He has always taken excellent care of me." Every compliment strengthened Conaire's reputation. Every public smile made his private cruelty harder to expose. And every new admirer made him more certain that Aveline could never survive without his name. Rohacia began correcting servants whenever she visited. She rearranged flowers, criticized menus, and suggested better ways to organize the household. "Conaire needs someone attentive," she said once, believing Aveline had not heard. Conaire watched Rohacia with growing approval. Then he looked at his wife and saw only a quiet woman who no longer argued, no longer begged, and no longer seemed capable of resisting him. He believed he had finally broken her. Rohacia believed she was proving herself worthy to replace her. Neither of them understood that Aveline was carefully making them believe replacing her was their own idea. The opportunity came during Blackthorn's annual Alliance banquet. By midday, carriages crowded the courtyard. Neighboring Alphas arrived with their Lunas, followed by council elders, wealthy merchants, and representatives from the royal court. Servants carried silver trays through halls decorated with moon lilies and black banners bearing Conaire's crest. Aveline welcomed every guest flawlessly. "Alpha Edric, Blackthorn is honored by your presence. Lady Ysoria, your journey from the eastern valleys must have been exhausting. Your chambers have already been prepared." She remembered every title, every alliance, and every private preference. She ensured the southern merchants received spiced wine, placed rival alphas at opposite ends of the table, and quietly corrected 3 servants' mistakes before anyone noticed. Even Rohacia watched her with reluctant admiration. "You seem unusually capable tonight," she said. Aveline smiled. Blackthorn must never be embarrassed before its allies. Across the hall, Conaire heard her. His expression gave nothing away. The banquet began beneath chandeliers burning with blue flame. Music drifted from the gallery, while servants carried roasted venison, glazed roots, and bowls of winter fruit between the tables. Everything moved exactly as Aveline had arranged. Until a young servant approached the high table with the ceremonial wine. The first glass was meant for the visiting royal elder. Nervous beneath the attention of so many powerful wolves, the girl placed it before Conaire instead. Aveline immediately reached for the glass. "Forgive us, Elder Kalen. This one is yours." The mistake lasted less than 5 seconds. No wine was spilled, no guest was insulted. The elder smiled and waved it away. "A harmless error, Luna." But Conaire had already decided it was not harmless. He rose slowly. The musicians stopped. Every conversation faded as he looked from the trembling servant to Aveline. "This is what my household has become." Aveline lowered her head. "It was corrected, Conaire. That is not the point." He stepped away from the table. "In front of our strongest allies, my servants cannot even remember the Order of Honor." The young maid dropped to her knees. "Please forgive me, Alpha." Aveline moved between them. "The responsibility is mine." Conaire's eyes settled on her. "Yes," he said, "it is." A silence spread through the hall. He turned toward the assembled guests. "For years, I have tolerated disorder inside my own home because I wish to protect my wife from humiliation." Several Lunas exchanged uneasy glances. Aveline remained still. Conaire continued. "She cannot manage servants. She cannot maintain discipline. She arrives late to meetings, forgets household instructions, and repeatedly embarrasses the Blackthorn name." Rohacia stood near one of the pillars, wearing a silver-green gown Aveline had once praised. Her eyes shone. Aveline saw it and understood. This was the moment they had been preparing for, without realizing she had prepared it too. "Conaire," she whispered, allowing fear to enter her voice. "Please, not before everyone." His expression hardened with satisfaction. Why not? You have failed before everyone. An elderly Luna rose from her chair. Alpha Blackthorn, surely this matter should be discussed privately. Conaire ignored her. My wife has also failed in the first duty of any Luna. The room became colder. Aveline knew what he would say before he spoke. She has given me no heir. A council elder shifted uncomfortably. The loss of a child is not a woman's failure. Conaire's jaw tightened. One loss may be tragedy. Two reveal weakness. Mahout stood near the servants' entrance, both hands clenched beneath her apron. Aveline did not look at her. Conaire stepped closer. I have carried this pack alone while she hides behind gowns, smiles and excuses. I will no longer allow an unworthy woman to weaken my house. Aveline let the goblet fall from her hand. It struck the floor and rolled across the marble. What are you saying? I am saying you will no longer stand beside me. Gasps moved through the hall. Conaire faced the council elders. Before every witness present, I withdraw Aveline's authority over Blackthorn. She is no longer my wife, and she will no longer bear the title of Luna. Aveline dropped to her knees. The movement was so sudden that several guests stood. No, she whispered. Conaire looked down at her. Inside, her heart was beating with something dangerously close to joy. Outside, she allowed tears to fill her eyes. Please do not cast me aside. His shoulders straightened. I have made my decision. I can improve. Give me one more chance. I will dismiss the servants. I will correct every mistake. You have had years. Aveline reached for the hem of his coat. I have nowhere else to go. That was the sentence he wanted. Triumph entered his face. You should have remembered that before disappointing me. Aveline bowed her head and began to cry. Around them, noblewomen looked away. One merchant muttered that the punishment was cruel. Elder Kalen's face hardened, but Conaire saw only Aveline kneeling before him. He believed he had destroyed her. Behind her tears, Aveline felt the prison doors open. Before the banquet ended, two servants carried a small trunk into the entrance hall. It contained 3 gowns, a pair of shoes, and the few personal belongings Conaire considered worthless. The coins beneath the floorboard were already hidden inside the lining. Mahout had stitched them there that morning. Aveline took the trunk. Her hand trembled only when Mahout briefly touched her arm. Be brave, the old woman whispered. Aveline walked toward the great doors. Rohesia stepped into her path. Conaire's ceremonial claiming bracelet circled her wrist. Her gown shimmered with expensive silver embroidery, and confidence had replaced the false concern she once wore. I suppose there is no reason to hide it now, Rohesia said. Aveline looked at the bracelet. So it seems. Rohesia smiled. I finally have everything I wanted. For one moment, Aveline saw the girl who had shared her food, secrets, and childhood dreams. She almost told her about the locked doors, the accusations, the blood wiped from marble before sunrise. Then she remembered Rohesia's expression during Conaire's announcement. She would not believe her. Aveline smiled gently. Take good care of him. Rohesia mistook pity for defeat. I will take better care of him than you ever did. Aveline left Blackthorn Keep before sunset. By nightfall, she reached her family's cottage. Demelza opened the door and stared at the trunk. What have you done? Conaire cast me out. Wigmund appeared behind her. You must go back. He rejected me before the entire Alliance Council. Then beg him to reconsider. Anselm stepped forward, fury replacing the desperation he had shown months earlier. The Academy has already received notice that Blackthorn will no longer pay my fees. Aveline looked at him. I lost my home, and you destroyed ours. Demelza began crying. Fall at his feet if you must. Tell him you were wrong. Melisende stood beside the fire, silent once again. No one asked whether Aveline had eaten. No one offered to carry her trunk. No one opened the door to the small room where she had slept as a child. That night, Aveline lay on the wooden bench outside the cottage with her cloak wrapped around her body and her trunk beneath her head. Before sunrise, she rose without knocking. She lifted the trunk and walked away without saying goodbye. She would never again ask her family to choose her. She would never again ask her family to choose her. By midday, Aveline reached the market town of Belmere. Her boots were soaked, her shoulders ached beneath the trunk, and hunger made the stone streets tilt beneath her feet. No one bowed, no one called her Luna. Merchants shouted over baskets of fruit, while carts passed without slowing. For the first time in years, she was invisible. A baker's wife found her beneath the shop awning when the rain began. You look ready to collapse. I need a room. There's one above the bakery, the roof leaks, and the window sticks. How much? 4 silver pieces each week. The price would empty Aveline's savings faster than planned. Thunder rolled over the town. I'll take it. The room held a narrow bed, 1 chair, and a table beneath a crooked window. When rain fell, water slipped through 3 places in the ceiling. Aveline placed bowls beneath the leaks and slept with her cloak beneath her head, because the pillow smelled of damp straw. Her coins disappeared quickly. Rent, thread, needles, lamp oil, food. Most days, she ate bread from the bakery and vegetable broth sold cheaply before the market closed. When fruit bruised, merchants offered it for half price. Yet every night, she bolted the door. No footsteps stopped outside it. No voice ordered her to kneel. No hand struck her. The room was cold, and hunger sometimes kept her awake, but she slept more peacefully than she ever had beneath Blackthorn's velvet canopies. A poor woman with peace is richer than a Luna living in fear, she whispered. The next morning, she began to work. She embroidered handkerchiefs first, moonflowers in the corners, silver wolves circling initials, small designs requiring little fabric. By evening, the needle had pierced her fingers until blood stained the cloth. She washed it away, wrapped her fingers, continued. Her first handkerchief sold for 3 copper coins. The second did not sell. A shopkeeper offered almost nothing for embroidered gloves. No one knows your name, he said. Fine work means little without a reputation. Aveline accepted the coins, because hunger did not care about pride. Then a merchant's wife entered the bakery during a storm and noticed the shawl over Aveline's chair. Who made this? I did. The woman touched the silver vines along the moon silk border. My daughter will appear at the royal winter court. Can you make something finer? If you show me her gown, I can make something no one else will wear. The order paid a month's rent. At court, 3 women asked who had made the shawl. Then came orders for gloves, a ceremonial veil, and a table covering bearing an Eastern Pack's crest. Within a year, Aveline left the leaking room and rented a narrow workshop near the market square. She hired 2 women first. One was a widowed she-wolf whose husband's family had taken her home. The other was an Omega cast out after refusing an arranged bond. You will be paid every 7th day, Aveline told them. No one here works only for food, and no one enters the back rooms without permission. The widow began to cry. Orders multiplied. Aveline hired 4 more workers. Carriages began stopping outside the workshop. Noblewomen who would once have known her only as Conaire's wife now admired her designs without recognizing the former Luna standing before them. While Aveline built a name with her own hands, Blackthorn Keep prepared for another wedding. Rohesia crossed the great hall beneath silver roses, wearing a gown covered in moonstones. Conaire fastened the lunar bracelet around her wrist before alphas, council elders, and noble families. The same women who once envied Aveline now envied Rohesia. She has everything. Alpha Conaire looks completely devoted. Perhaps she was always better suited to him. During the first week, Conaire covered Rohesia in affection. He gave her a ruby necklace, ordered new rooms prepared, took her riding through the cedar valleys, and asked her opinion at dinner. Before the pack, he raised her hand. Blackthorn has finally received the Luna it deserves. Rohesia believed him. She believed her warmth had healed what Aveline's coldness had damaged. She believed Conaire had only needed the right woman. During the second week, he frowned at the flowers she chose for the council chamber. White lilies make the room look funereal. I thought they matched the banners. You thought wrong. The next day, he criticized the dinner table. Then her gown. Then the way she laughed at a visiting alpha's joke. Rohesia excused everything. He was tired. He carried too many responsibilities. Aveline had left the household in disorder. By the third week, Rohesia entered the drawing room carrying tea while Conaire reviewed border reports. I thought you might want something warm. He did not look up. I did not ask for tea. I only wanted to help. You interrupted me. I'm sorry. I'll leave. The slap came before she reached the door. Rohesia stumbled against the marble table, one hand pressed to her burning cheek. Conaire returned to his papers. Next time, listen the first time. She stood frozen. It was the same room where Aveline had once stood, with a broken moonstone necklace at her feet. Rohesia looked toward the closed doors and heard Aveline's final words as clearly as though she stood beside her. Take good care of him. For the first time, Rohesia understood. It had never been surrender. It had been a warning. It had been a warning. Nearly a year passed before Rohesia admitted how completely she had misunderstood it. To the kingdom, she appeared radiant. At royal ceremonies, she stood beside Conaire in silver-threaded gowns, while he rested one possessive hand against her waist. He praised her before council elders, called her the strength of Blackthorn, and ordered musicians to play whenever she entered the winter hall. Noblewomen watched her with envy. She has transformed him. He never smiled this often with Aveline. Some women are simply born to be Luna. Rohesia smiled whenever she heard them. Then she returned to Blackthorn Keep and locked herself inside her dressing room. Long sleeves covered the bruises on her arms. High collars concealed the marks around her throat. Powder softened the purple shadow beneath one eye, but nothing hid the split in her lower lip. Whenever servants noticed, they looked away. Rohesia finally understood why they had once lowered their heads around Aveline. Conaire criticized everything. Her laughter was too loud. Her gowns attracted attention. Her gowns were too plain and embarrassed his rank. She spoke too much during council dinners. She sat too quietly and made him appear cruel. If another alpha greeted her warmly, Conaire accused her of encouraging him. If she avoided every man in the room, he demanded to know what guilt she was hiding. There is no pleasing you, Rohesia whispered once. Conaire heard. His hand closed around her throat. A Luna exists to please her Alpha. Afterward, he kissed her temple before the morning assembly and called her his beloved mate. Rohasia smiled for the pack. She became careful with her words, careful with her steps, careful even with her breathing. She searched Conaire's expression for danger before entering any room. Without realizing it, she became the woman she had once judged. She remembered Aveline's forced smiles, the long sleeves worn in summer, the sudden silences whenever Conaire entered. Rohasia had believed weakness caused those things. Now she understood. Conaire had never needed a reason to hurt Aveline. He only needed someone with less power than himself. Far from Blackthorn Keep, Aveline's name was rising through the kingdom. Her embroidery house expanded into the adjoining building. Royal Lunas commissioned ceremonial gowns bearing her moon silk designs. Noble families waited months for wedding veils, winter cloaks, and hand-stitched pack banners. But the proudest part of Aveline's work was hidden behind the elegant showroom. There, women escaping violent packs learned sewing, bookkeeping, and trade. Widows received wages. Abandoned Omegas slept in warm rooms above the workshop until they could afford homes of their own. No one was asked what title she had lost. No one was told to endure. One rainy afternoon, a woman in a plain grey cloak entered the shop. Aveline recognized Rohasia before she removed the hood. The expensive powder could not conceal everything. "Come with me," Aveline said. She led her into a private sitting room and poured tea into 2 porcelain cups. Rohasia stared at the steam. "I thought you would throw me out." "I considered it." The honesty made Rohasia flinch. Aveline placed a cup before her. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Rohasia began to cry. "I thought I had defeated you." Aveline remained silent. "I believed Conaire was unhappy because you were cold. I thought if I admired him enough, obeyed him enough, loved him better, he would become the man he showed everyone else." Her fingers tightened around the cup. "I ignored everything. Your fear, your silence, the way the servants watched him. I saw only the title." She looked up. "I stole your husband. I stole your place. I betrayed the only friend who ever loved me." Aveline's expression softened, but she did not reach across the table. Rohasia swallowed. "Why did you not warn me?" Aveline held her gaze. "Would you have believed me?" Rohasia opened her mouth. No answer came. She remembered the bracelet she had displayed with pride, the satisfaction she felt when Aveline was cast out, the way she had mistaken compassion for defeat. "No," she whispered. "I would have thought you were jealous." Aveline nodded. "That is why I said only what you might remember later." Fresh tears rolled down Rohasia's face. "Do you hate me?" "I did." The answer hurt, but Rohasia accepted it. Aveline continued. "Then I learned that hatred keeps the door open. I closed it. I stole your life." "No," Aveline's voice was quiet. "You inherited the prison I had finally escaped." Rohasia bowed over her hands and wept. When she left the workshop, fear still waited for her at Blackthorn Keep. But something else travelled beside it. Decision. That night, she locked her chamber door and wrote a letter to her father. She described the first slap, the broken ribs, the bruises hidden beneath ceremonial gowns, and the threats Conaire made whenever she spoke of leaving. At the bottom, she wrote one line. "Father, if you do not come now, I do not think I will survive much longer." Before dawn, Rohasia found a young stable boy preparing the horses. "Take this to my father," she whispered, pressing the sealed letter into his hand. "Do not stop. Do not show it to anyone." The boy hid it beneath his coat. "I understand, my Luna." He crossed the stable yard and hurried toward the outer gate. Conaire was waiting beside it. The stable boy stopped so suddenly that his boots scraped across the stones. Conaire's gaze dropped to the shape hidden beneath the boy's coat. "Where are you going before sunrise?" The boy swallowed. "To the lower village, Alpha." "With what?" "Nothing, my lord." Conaire held out his hand. The boy remained frozen. "Give it to me." Slowly he removed Rohesia's letter and placed it in Conaire's palm. By the time Rohesia heard footsteps outside her chamber, the seal had already been broken. Conaire entered without knocking. The letter rested open in one hand. Rohesia's heart stopped. "You have been begging your father to rescue you." She stepped away from the dressing table. "Conaire, let me explain. You wrote that I beat you." Her gaze moved toward the door. "You wrote that you fear for your life." "Because I do." His expression changed. "You ungrateful little fool. I placed you above every woman in this kingdom. You gave me a title and called it love. I gave you everything Aveline failed to appreciate." Rohesia backed toward the door. She appreciated nothing because there was nothing here but fear. Conaire crossed the room. Rohesia reached for the handle. He slammed one hand against the door before she could open it. "You intend to disgrace my name before the entire kingdom. I only want to leave." "No one leaves me." He seized her arm. Rohesia twisted free and ran into the corridor. Servants stepped from adjoining rooms, then froze when they saw Conaire following her. "Stop her," he ordered. No one moved. Rohesia reached the top of the grand moon stair. Conaire caught the back of her cloak and dragged her around. "Please," she whispered, "let me go quietly. I will take nothing. You will take my reputation. I will tell the truth." His face filled with rage. Rohesia struggled as his hands closed around her shoulders. "Conaire, no." He threw her away from him. Her back struck the silver railing. For one suspended moment, she clung to it. Then her fingers slipped. Rohesia fell. Her body struck one marble step, then another. The ceremonial silver lining, the staircase burned wherever it touched her skin, weakening her wolf before it could begin healing. She crashed onto the entrance hall floor and did not move. Mahout's scream echoed through Blackthorn Keep. The healer arrived before sunrise and worked for hours. Conaire remained outside Rohesia's chamber, demanding updates, as though concern could erase what every servant had witnessed. Near midday, the healer emerged. "She will live." Conaire exhaled. But the silver entered the wounds along her spine. Her wolf cannot repair the damage. What does that mean? She will never move below her shoulders. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. "Fix it." "I cannot." "Then find someone who can." "There is no one." Rohesia awakened that evening. When Conaire attempted to enter, she began screaming until the healer ordered him out. She refused his flowers. She refused his apologies. She refused to hear his name. Her only request was spoken in a weak whisper. "Bring me Aveline." The message reached Belmere the following morning. Aveline stood motionless inside her workshop while the messenger explained what had happened. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she removed her apron. "I will come." Blackthorn Keep appeared unchanged when her carriage passed through the gates. The black towers still rose above the cedar trees. The silver wolf banners still moved in the wind. The fountain still gleamed at the center of the courtyard, but the place no longer looked powerful. It looked like a beautiful tomb. Mahout waited at the entrance. The moment Aveline stepped down, the old woman embraced her. "I prayed you would never have to return." Aveline held her tightly. "I am not here for him." Mahout nodded through her tears. "I know." Rohisia's chamber smelled of herbs and silver-burn medicine. She lay beneath white blankets, her face pale, her body unnaturally still. Only her eyes moved when Aveline entered. The servants withdrew. Aveline sat beside the bed. Rohisia began crying. "I should have believed you." Aveline took her hand carefully. "You could not understand what you had never lived. I betrayed you." "Yes." The answer was gentle, but it did not erase the truth. "I watched him cast you out," Rohisia whispered. "I wore his bracelet while you carried your trunk through those doors." Aveline said nothing. "I thought your warning was bitterness. I thought you wanted me to be afraid because I had won. You wanted the life everyone saw. I wanted your husband." "No." Aveline looked toward the closed chamber door. "You wanted the man he pretended to be." Rohisia's breathing shook. "He was always the enemy, wasn't he?" "He was. Not you. Never me." Rohisia closed her eyes. "Can you forgive me?" Aveline brushed a loose strand of hair from her forehead. "I forgave you the day I walked away from this house." Rohisia wept until exhaustion pulled her into sleep. She died 2 mornings later. Her death broke something inside Blackthorn Keep that fear had preserved for years. The stable boy went first. Before royal investigators, he testified that Rohisia had given him a sealed plea for help and that Conaire had intercepted it at the gate. Mahout followed. She described the broken necklace, the locked rooms, the blood scrubbed from marble floors, and the countless mornings Aveline had been ordered to smile before the pack. The healer presented her records. "Both of Aveline's miscarriages followed violent assaults," she said. "The second occurred after she was thrown down the moon stair. Kitchen servants described shattered dishes. Maids spoke of bruises hidden beneath powder. Guards admitted hearing screams, but obeying orders not to interfere. One by one, the silence that protected Conaire became evidence against him. The kingdom that had praised his devotion learned what happened after his doors closed. The Wolf Council assembled inside the same hall where Conaire had publicly rejected Aveline. This time, he stood alone. By royal decree, he was stripped of Alpha authority. Blackthorn Pack was removed from his control. His lands, wealth, and titles were seized. His name was erased from the council rolls. When the guards approached with silver restraints, Conaire looked toward Aveline. "You caused this." She met his eyes without fear. "No, I survived long enough for the truth to find you." They locked the chains around his wrists. The great doors opened. Conaire was led across the courtyard while servants and pack members watched in silence. Then the gates that had once imprisoned Aveline closed behind him. Several years passed. The name Blackthorn slowly became associated not with power, wealth, or an admired alpha, but with the crimes hidden behind beautiful walls. The seized pack house was converted into a royal refuge where abused she-wolves could seek protection without first begging their families or alphas for permission. Aveline never returned to live there. She had built something of her own. What began as a narrow workshop above a market street became the most respected moon-silk house in the Wolf Kingdoms. Its silver crest appeared on gowns worn by queens, royal lunars, noble women, and foreign ambassadors, Brides crossed entire territories to commission veils embroidered by Aveline's hand. Pack leaders displayed her ceremonial banners inside council halls. Carriages lined the road outside her establishment from sunrise until evening. Yet the elegant showroom revealed only part of what Aveline had created. Behind it stood 2 large workrooms filled with women earning fair wages. Above them were warm chambers reserved for those who arrived with nowhere safe to sleep. A nearby cottage housed widows and abandoned omegas while they learned bookkeeping, sewing, or merchant negotiation. No woman was forced to explain every bruise before receiving help. No family was contacted without her permission. No one was told that a husband's title mattered more than her life. Aveline hired guards, answerable only to the women living there. She created an emergency fund for those escaping violent packs, and negotiated agreements with several royal territories so that no Alpha could drag a worker away by claiming ownership over her bond. People no longer introduced her as Conaire's former Luna. They called her Mistress Aveline, founder of the Silver Thread House. Her name belonged entirely to her. One autumn afternoon, Aveline was reviewing a royal wedding commission when an assistant entered the workroom. "There are visitors asking to see you." "Do they have an appointment?" "No." The assistant hesitated. "They say they are your family." Aveline's hand stopped above the ledger. Through the front window, she saw 4 figures waiting beside the entrance. Wigmund's hair had turned almost entirely grey. Demelza leaned on a wooden cane. Anselm no longer wore the uniform of the Royal Fang Academy, and Melisend's once perfect finishing school posture had softened beneath the weight of adulthood. Aveline closed the ledger. "Bring them to the private sitting room." When she entered, no one spoke. Wigmund looked around at the polished tables, embroidered curtains, and framed commissions bearing royal seals. His eyes settled on the daughter he had once sent back to a violent man because he feared losing comfort. Then he slowly lowered himself to his knees. "Father," Aveline said, "please let me finish." His voice shook. "We knew you were suffering. We saw the marks. You told us what he had done, and still we measured your pain against grain, cattle, and protection." Demelza began crying. Wigmund bowed his head. "We sacrificed our daughter's safety because we were afraid of becoming poor again." Aveline remained silent. Demelza stepped forward. "I held your hands and asked you to endure. I called it patience because I was too ashamed to call it what it was." She pressed one trembling hand against her chest. "Cowardice." Anselm could not look at Aveline. "When you came to us after losing your child, I thought only of my graduation. I begged you to return because I valued my future above your life." His voice broke. "I became a royal warrior, but every honor I received reminded me what you were forced to pay for it." Melisende stood last. Tears filled her eyes. "I said nothing." Aveline looked at her younger sister. "I wanted to defend you. I knew they were wrong, but I was afraid of losing my place at the Silver Moon Institute." She swallowed. "My silence helped send you back." The room became quiet. Wigmund remained on his knees. "We do not deserve anything from you, but if forgiveness is possible, we are asking for it." Aveline studied the 4 people she had once loved enough to sacrifice herself for. There was a time when she imagined this moment differently. In those fantasies, she screamed. She listed every night they abandoned her to Conaire's cruelty. She made them feel the loneliness she had carried from their cottage back to Blackthorn Keep. But the woman standing before them no longer needed their pain to validate her own. "I forgave you years ago." Demelza covered her mouth. Relief passed across Anselm's face. Wigmund began to rise. Aveline continued. but forgiveness does not return us to what we were. Their relief disappeared. Demelza reached toward her. You are still our daughter. I am. Then perhaps, with time. No. Aveline's voice was gentle. That family ended when I arrived at your door, injured, grieving and afraid, and every one of you asked what my escape would cost you. Wigmund lowered his eyes again. Aveline looked at each of them. If hardship comes, you will not starve. If your home is threatened, I will make certain you are protected. I wish you health, peace, and long lives. Demelza began to cry harder. But I will not return to the relationship we had. Forgiveness means I no longer carry hatred for what you did. It does not mean I must place my heart back into the hands that failed to protect it. No one argued. There was no shouting, no dramatic accusation, only the quiet recognition that some wounds could close without restoring what had been broken. Wigmund rose slowly. Thank you for receiving us. Aveline nodded. Her family left together. She watched from the window until they disappeared into the crowd, then returned to the main workshop. Laughter greeted her. One woman was teaching a young Omega how to guide silver thread through moon silk. Another argued cheerfully with a merchant over fabric prices. Two children chased each other between the tables while their mothers worked nearby without fear. Mahout sat beside the window, older now but still correcting stitches with the same sharp eye. You kept them waiting, she said. Aveline smiled. They needed the time. Mahout looked around the workshop. So did you. Aveline once believed Rohesia had taken her position when she became Luna. Now she understood that there had been nothing valuable to steal. The title had only made her prison appear desirable. Aveline once believed revenge meant making Conaire suffer as she had suffered. In the end, her greatest victory was simpler. She built a life his cruelty could not enter, a name his title could not overshadow, and a home where no frightened woman would ever be told to endure for someone else's comfort. And somewhere beyond the safety of Silver Thread House, another woman was still trapped behind beautiful doors, waiting for someone to believe her. Her story begins in the next episode. Subscribe now, because the next Luna will not wait for freedom to find her. She will burn down everything standing between them.